Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, October the 17th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day and your first daily dose of Neville for the day, because we're going to continue our discussion of Neville Goddard. We're doing more Neville Goddard lately. I have to say thank you, Cindie, for bringing him into our conversations, because his stuff it's a little weird. It's a little hard to read sometimes. It's a little hard to figure out without your Neville Goddard decoder ring. But, we've made good progress, and it's been good.
Well, I'm excited about this particular one. Of course, I'm always excited about Neville. I think Neville's my favorite of all of the law of attraction or new thought or whatever. I don't think he would consider himself in either of those groups.
Probably not.
We put him there because we recognize the message, and the methods may be a little different, but it's still all about using your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings to create something consciously. So I think it fits.
It does fit. And I like the emphasis on feelings, not because I'm good at it, but because I'm not good at it. And I think most people are not good at getting into that feeling space. So emphasizing the importance of it and then discussing ways to get there and how to do it as simply as possible, I think makes a valuable contribution.
Something that kind of hit me last night was, I don't know, I haven't watched hours and hours and hours of Joe Dispenza video or listened to a lot of his stuff, but I've read a couple of his books, and every once in a while I'll see something. I always enjoy watching him and hearing what he has to say. And I saw an interview that he did where he talked about, now I kind of came in the middle of it, and the interviewer was asking him about meditation, and he said something like, well, imagine if your eyesight was 25% better and your sense of smell and taste, so all 5 senses, he said, imagine if they were increased by 25%.
Woohoo.
And I kind of was thinking about that last night because we're studying Neville, and Neville put so much emphasis on feelings.
Right.
And I know, emotions and feelings are two different things, but I tend to put the senses in the area of feelings. Mm-hmm. Like the way I usually explain it is, emotions, we often say, we often put them together, right? We said, I felt sad, and that's correct.
Yeah.
But we also think of emotions as happy, sad, mad, frustrated, whatever. And then feelings as I have a knot in my stomach, or
right.
My neck feels tight, or my head hurts, or whatever. Those are, feel in the body. And so I think when I was hearing about meditation somehow increasing the sharpness of our senses, I thought, oh, wow. I'm pulling this all together because Neville talks about, and we're going to jump into that part when we start today about, he says, immobilize the body, but I'm like, this is meditation, because he talks about pretend like you're drowsy, lie down like you're going to take a nap. This is meditation.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so if his emphasis is on feelings, and we know, Joe Dispenza's over there saying, well, meditation can sharpen your senses, which was what it sounded like he was saying to me. Mm-hmm. Then this all works really well.
Yeah. It all comes together. You're right.
It's all starting to come together.
I mean, because the senses are different. I mean, there's really no doubt about it. The emotions are really how we're reacting to what sensory information we're getting, and how we feel about it and so forth. But they're so closely intertwined that you're right. It's almost silly to separate them in one sense, just because they are so aligned with each other. Talk about alignment. The alignment between the senses and the emotions is almost universally perfect.
Right. That's true.
Isn't it?
We don't have to work at it. It just happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
We see something that's exciting, we get excited. Yeah, there's pretty quick motion there. Emotions are energy in motion, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
It's all connected. So, yeah, so it's been exciting.
It has
so
been
what's
exciting.
going on over there? We've got pouring rain today. How about you?
We have sun and cold. This morning it's 42 degrees, but it's sunny.
Goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, we have frost on the cars. I mean,
I don't know if we have anybody in, I'm sure we have listeners in Texas, but yesterday, I have family in Texas. I saw a map of Texas, and at the very top of Texas, it was like in the 30s, and at the very bottom, I think it was in the 80s or 90s.
Wow. What a variation.
It is a big state.
It is. It is. But still, I mean, that's a big variation. Wow.
But it always cracks me up. I always love to ask you about the weather because you're very far from me, and so it's
right.
Like 40s. Wow.
I know, it's crazy. It's really something. Yeah. But it does make it interesting, and it reminds all of us that we're in different parts of the world with different experiences going on, not just with the weather, but with our lives, and yet we're all connected. And we're connected both spiritually and electronically. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, we are. And I think that it's a wonderful thing that we are using this amazing technology to put this message out.
Absolutely. In fact, you and I were talking just before we came on the air live about something that I'd been exploring. We actually have 5 new co-hosts that our listeners are going to be introduced to starting tomorrow afternoon in a big way. Well, actually, they got their first introduction on Monday, Cindie, because Patty Framo, when she flew in from San Francisco to San Diego, wasn't feeling well at all. She really needed to take the day off. And fortunately, well, I should say law of attractionally, 15 minutes before, I had done an interview with a new candidate for the Tuesday afternoon podcast now that Wendy Dillard is leaving. And I decided she was a good fit. Then Patty calls and says, well, I can't do the show. So I contacted Alex King, and she says, yeah, sure, I'll sit in for you. Why not? So this was like a half hour after I had first met her. She's sitting in doing the podcast on Monday afternoon, which was really wild. And it went well. It was good. Alex lives in Massachusetts. Actually, she lives on Cape Cod, so she's right on the water, right within like walking distance of the water on the Cape. So she's in a beautiful place to live.
Wow.
But, really nice young lady. She has Asperger's syndrome, and we spent a lot of time talking about that, but just a really delightful person to talk to. And we've got 4 other people who are coming on as well, one of whom is a gentleman named Mark Evans, who's going to be joining Anne-Marie Kanata-McEwen and myself on the Sunday evening podcast. And Mark was telling me a really interesting story about how he had previously done something with somebody online. It wasn't a podcast. It was live streaming on Facebook. And the only thing he didn't like about it is he didn't like the host's orientation. The host basically wanted to just tell dirty jokes all the time, and he didn't want to do that. But the fascinating part was because it was live streaming on Facebook, they were able to interact directly with listeners in a way that you can't always do. Like we were always wanting people to call in, right? And we do get a few people to call in. But to be perfectly honest, when you're a listener, it's a little intimidating to call in on any kind of a show. But it's easy to comment. And if you have a nice quick way to comment that the host can pay attention to, especially if it's on Facebook, that's a great way to interact. So I've been thinking about maybe we actually start doing some live streaming of our podcasts as we're recording them. So there's another example of how we may end up tying in the technology and have it do some amazing things to connect us all together.
Yay. It just reminds me of that quote that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Really? Yes.
Right? Because
it is.
It's just amazing. We're like the Jetsons.
That's right.
Great.
We're also like Star Trek. I mean, we even have communicators.
Right.
We call them cell phones, but they
right.
I mean, especially the early cell phones, they look just like the communicators on Star Trek. It was wild. They had the little flip thing and so forth.
I'm a little disappointed we don't have flying cars yet, but, we do have airplanes, so.
Yeah, that's true. And the transporter device isn't working. So Scotty's going to have to work on that one. But other than that, yes. Well, the medical scanner, even the medical scanners, they have medical scanners. They can actually run a medical scanner over your body like Dr. McCoy could. I mean, Oh my goodness.
You talk about the transporters not working, but Neville Goddard seemed to have managed it a couple times.
This is true, yes. Well, he found a great way to manifest steamship tickets, which was almost unheard of at the time. That was pretty cool.
Right. Oh, that's fun.
It is fun.
Before we dive in, I know you want to get the promos done.
Absolutely. First one being, of course, we want all of our non-subscribers who are listening in to become subscribers. And we actually have much more subscribers than we do non-subscribers who listen to any given podcast. But from the numbers I've been able to put together, maybe as many as a third of people who listen are not subscribers. So it's a relevant message, and we want you to become a subscriber because you get all the episodes coming right to your smartphone every single day, and you can play them whenever you want to. In fact, Cindy, you took a message on Twitter from a listener who described himself as a binge listener, I believe. Is that what did he say, binge listener or back to back? I can't remember what he said.
Binge listeners.
Yeah, right. Which was really cool. It was so great. Becoming a subscriber gives you the opportunity to hear all of the episodes with all of our wonderful co-hosts. And I haven't taken a full count, but I think that means we're up to 12 co-hosts now when all is said and done. Yeah.
Our team is growing.
It's really growing. It's growing like crazy. So yeah, become a subscriber. If most people know how to do it, but if you don't know how to do it, don't worry. We make it really easy. Just go to the homepage of the website at loatoday.net. You'll find instructions right there. Basically, you'll have these two big icons, one for Android phones, one for iPhones. And you click the right one and it walks you right through the process. It's real simple. And then also for all of our listeners, both new subscribers and long-term subscribers and everybody in between, we want you to continue to put the message out and help get the word out. Spread the word about LOA Today just by posting something on your favorite social media channels about loatoday.net, because we've been doing that for the last 3.5 months or so, and it's really working. It's paying off in a big way. More and more people are getting their daily doses of happy. So please continue to do that because, oh boy, our world really needs more happiness. We need more feel good. And that's what our show is about, helping the world feel good. So please keep sharing the message. And those are our messages for the day.
Thank you very much.
All
you know,
right.
when you were talking about sharing, I started thinking about people sharing information with me, you know, telling me about like I had a friend that sent me a podcast the other day, said, this is one of my favorites, you know, and sent it to me.
Wow.
And people telling me about a good book.
Yeah.
People telling me about a good restaurant, whatever it is. It's like my life is consistently enriched because people have told me about something that turns out to be a big part of my enjoyment of life, whether it's a book or a restaurant or a podcast or a movie, right? I mean, we're always doing that, recommending
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful that people let me know when they've enjoyed something, because that's how I find out about a lot of things. And so, yeah, it's like a service that you do for someone to just say, you know, on social media, I've been listening to loatoday.net.
That's a great point, because very often, I mean, some of us are very outgoing and it's easy for us to share stuff, but some of us are more introverted. I'm actually, you may not believe this, but I actually am a natural introvert. I've been introverted all my life, and doing a podcast was a bit of a stretch for me for a while. But as an introvert, I understand how it can be a little uncomfortable to put something out there. Like, oh, geez, I don't really want to, you know, shove this down somebody's throat or something like that. But like you point out, in fact, it's usually well received. People want to hear stuff because it's gotten to the point now with the connected technological society that people rely on other people they know for information about what's good out there. And so actually
Sure.
you're doing a tremendous service to people that you know, as well as to people you don't know. That's what's so cool about social media. You're doing
Right.
it to people you don't know as well. You're letting them know about something that's really, really good. So absolutely, I completely agree with you that that's a wonderful part of it.
I don't know how many times I've said, you know, oh, so-and-so told me about, you know, that this particular movie was really good, so now I'm excited to go see it. Or I saw somebody mentioning this or that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great. And thank you so much for doing it because, you know, it's working.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Let me tell you, like I've told you and others before on the podcast, I started doing it just because it felt good to do it. But the second benefit, and almost as big, maybe even bigger, is the realization of how many people are listening and loving what they're hearing. Wow, that just does amazing things for me. Just thinking that we're helping people just by doing a podcast. I mean, oh, it awes me. That's the best word. It's awe. Like, oh my God, wow.
Well, this is gonna maybe awe you today. This.
Oh, okay.
We've been working through Neville's book. It's a really short book. Neville Goddard's book, Out of This World. But we started because of a story that we heard. And by the way, this is so funny. The story we read about the dance instructor that created over and over using this method we're going to talk about in a minute.
Right.
I kept thinking it was a woman. And when I read this story, to someone and they said, and at the end of it, I said she, and they said, oh, that's funny that is it a woman? Because the whole time you were reading the story, I was imagining it was a man. And I said, oh, and then I looked and there is no name attached to the letter. It's just initials, but it was initials with Junior.
Oh, yeah. You usually don't have women who
oh,
say Junior. That's true.
I think you're right. I think it was a man.
Right.
And I thought, oh, that's funny. And I said, well, I guess it's just because all the dance teachers that I know are women. And then the more I thought about it, no, I know a couple dance instructors that are men.
Well, there'd have to be. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do partner dancing with mixed couples. It wouldn't work.
Well, and when you think about when this was written in the 40s, in the 50s, and the Arthur Murray Dance Studios, it probably was more than likely that it was a man that owned the studio, right? Owned the franchise.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was funny. But we read this story and we read it on the podcast yesterday. And now we're reading the book that this person read that he had so much success with. And so this is today in the middle of the first chapter, we're going to dive right in with the technique.
The technique.
So here is a technique, Neville says, that makes it easy to encounter events before they occur, to call things which are not seen as though they were. People have a habit of slighting the importance of simple things, but this simple formula for changing the future was discovered after years of searching and experimenting. The first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. And I think that's so important because you can't have what you want if you don't know what it is. So getting really clear is important. Now, the second step, secondly, construct an event which you believe you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. An event which implies fulfillment of your desire, something that will have the action of self predominant. And then thirdly, immobilize the physical body and induce a condition akin to sleep. Lie on a bed or relax in a chair and imagine that you are sleepy. Then, with eyelids closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to experience, in imagination, mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. You must always participate in the imaginary action, not merely stand back and look on. But you must feel that you are actually performing the action so that the imaginary sensation is real to you. It's important always to remember that the proposed action must be one which follows the fulfillment of your desire. And also you must feel your action or feel yourself into the action until it has all the vividness and distinctness of reality.
So let's review those 3 steps. So the first step is know what you want very clearly.
Know what you want.
Second step is to construct an event. That's an interesting phrase, construct an event. So basically piece together in your mind an event that you think is going to happen in fulfillment of it right after it happens, I guess. After
the fulfillment. And when I give these instructions to a client, I usually say, I usually describe that constructing the event as if you were going to write it down, it would just be a couple of sentences.
Right,
or a paragraph.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday, keeping it into a really short vignette rather than painting a big painting.
Exactly. And it's something that would imply that your desire has been fulfilled already. And then the third, that's when you go into I say meditation.
It is meditation. That's what he's describing. He just didn't have a word for it.
I say that you get quiet, you relax your body. And, I want to say something about that. It's really important to take the time, and it doesn't have to be a long period of time, but I noticed that I've been meditating for 20 years. And in the beginning, the way I would meditate was I would focus my attention at the top of my head and allow the top of my head to feel relaxed. And then I would move down my eyes, all the little muscles around my eyes, make sure they're relaxed. And then the sides of my head, I would take my time with my entire body till I got to my toes. And then I would go into whatever, conscious creation method I wanted to use or whatever kind of meditation I was doing. And over time, and I had really great results, especially with conscious creation. And then over time, I could go into meditation pretty easily because I was, practiced, right?
Yeah.
But then I noticed that I started rushing through the relaxation part. Or skipping it all together and going right into the visualization or whatever I was doing. And I stopped getting such great results. Like it took me a while to connect it, but I think one time, I had extra time. And so I thought I'm going to do this full meditation. And I noticed a correlation at some point that it really made a difference. So when he says, to immobilize your body and induce a condition akin to sleep, lie on a bed, relax in a chair, imagine that you're sleepy, have your eyes shut. I think it's taking that, and it's not a lot of time. It might take just a few minutes, but I think it's worth it.
Do you still do that same method of working from the top of your head down to your toes?
Yep.
You do? Okay. So that's really effective then. And
I record guided meditations. And I always do that in the guided meditation.
Work from top to bottom, okay.
5 minutes of it is probably me taking the listener through relaxing the parts of the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, do you listen to your own guided meditations?
I have, yeah. I do sometimes, but not as a general rule when I'm just meditating. I don't.
Because it's kind of weird, isn't it, hearing your own voice?
Kind of, yeah.
I tried that one time, and it's just like, oh, God, I can't listen to this.
The funny thing about listening to your own voice, though, is that I believe your brain really processes it in a powerful way.
Probably. That's true.
And remember, I told the story before about the man, Shad Helmstetter, who wrote a book called, I think it was called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, something like that.
Okay.
He was the one that had created all these note cards with affirmations. He wanted to be healthier. He wanted to lose weight. He wanted different things. And every day he would add a new note card, but it got to be too much time in the morning. So he recorded his voice, and it wasn't meditation, but he recorded all of his affirmations, and he would listen to them in the bathroom in the morning while he was shaving and washing up and getting ready for work. And they had a double sink in their bathroom, and his wife would be on the other side, and his wife started losing weight. Just listening to his affirmations.
Oh, that's funny.
But I think there has been some study about, that's why mirror work and affirmations are important. It's us hearing our own voice say, whatever we're saying to ourselves. So no, I don't listen to it. Like when I go to meditate, I usually just listen to, I put on maybe some meditation music or nothing at all, but I do listen to the guided meditations. I write them, and I have written guided meditations for other companies before. And, so I listen to them when I record them to edit them or to see if if they work.
Oh, of course. Yeah. You gotta test them.
Maybe I should do that though. Maybe this week I should just start listening to my own guided meditations and see what happens.
Well, it's an interesting question because on the one hand, like you said, if you're listening to your own voice, it's got to be very powerful because you're hearing your own voice say it. On the other hand, there is what I'll call the placebo effect, which is you're trusting someone else's words. There's something about trusting somebody else that makes it, I think, easier to relax when you're doing something like a meditation and to buy into the messages that you're getting. Somehow it's easier if it's coming from somebody else's voice. So I suspect it's powerful in both directions, just in different ways, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's like that idea of, I mean, it's a guided meditation. So you're trusting that you can relax and someone else is going to guide you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. I think that's so true. Okay. So we've got our 3 steps, and the last one is this immobilizing the body. And he's going to give us an example now.
And let's finish off that third step too, because there was a really important point at the end of it, the last sentence. You must
Okay, we'll look at that again. With eyes closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to experience in imagination, mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. You must always participate in the imaginary action, not merely stand back and look on, but you must feel that you are actually performing the action so that the imaginary sensation is real to you.
Yeah, that participation part seems really important to me.
Right. So it's not like when you're watching a movie, you're not closing your eyes and imagining that you're looking over there, seeing yourself do something. No, you're in your body and you're seeing what you're doing from a first person viewpoint.
And I guess the reason I think that's such an important point is that I find for myself, whether I am just trying to imagine something or doing a meditation or, maybe constructing the scene like in the second step or any of that kind of thing, the hardest part for me is the feeling part, getting myself to feel what it is that I'm imagining. Because I'm so used to imagining abstractly, I'm so used to doing it in a way that is like a third person observer than like a participant. And on those rare occasions when I can feel it as a first person, it scares me, to be perfectly honest. I don't mean like I'm terrified, oh my God, I got to run away. But it scares me enough that, I can't stay there. It's too uncomfortable. All these emotions are pouring out of me. And then I have to back off. And it makes me realize I need to do more of that. But nevertheless, it's the hardest part of the whole process for me.
Well, the other thing is, I'm glad you brought that up because the part about, actually performing it, and Neville being really careful to mention it, because I remember back when I was first doing a lot of guided meditation, and I was having a conversation with somebody one day about it. They were also somebody who was starting to get into meditation, and she asked me, when you're meditating, and she asked me about my viewpoint. Mm-hmm. Right? Because we did a meditation where it was like someone's guiding you and you're walking through a forest and then you sit down on a rock or a bench or whatever. And she said, now, are you like, when you meditate, are you kind of up above and just watching yourself down there walk through the forest? And I said, no. No, I'm walking. I'm feeling the leaves under my feet. I'm walking through the forest on the path, and then I sit on the rock. I'm not watching myself do it. And she said, whenever I do a guided meditation, I'm always like I'm back somewhere else and I'm looking down, watching myself do it. And so, some people may naturally be oriented that way where they do a meditation. So it's really important that you are like in your body, not watching from afar, but in your body. And
I suspect he's going to get into this, but I want to get your take on it before we go there. Like I was saying, for me, getting into my body in a sense you just described, getting into that place where I'm participating is the hardest part. It's much easier to look from farther away. That objective viewpoint is just, that's a safe place. I don't really have to get into it too much. I'm observing it and okay, it's there, and I don't have to get any closer than that. But when you are immersed in it, when you immerse yourself into it, it's a scarier place to be because you feel more vulnerable. You feel more out of control. All of a sudden you're doing this stuff that you've never dealt before, and you're not really sure how you're going to get out of it, and you're not really sure if it's going to be okay, and all that kind of thing. And plus you got these emotions pouring out of you, and like, oh my God, I just created these emotions out of thin air. These emotions aren't actually going on. This is me creating it in my imagination. I don't know if I can handle that.
Well, let's deal with 2 things right off the bat that may be useful. The first one is if you're having trouble like getting into your body, so to speak, being there, in the same way that one of the easiest ways to bring yourself back to the present moment is to tap into your 5 senses. So ask yourself to notice the temperature in the room, if you can smell anything, if you're sitting on a chair, can you feel the chair beneath you? Can you feel your clothing on your skin or the air in the room on your skin? Can you taste anything? So you're tapping into your five senses. What can you hear? Like right now, speaking with you, if I bring my attention to the temperature in the room, I can suddenly notice that it's a nice temperature. I can hear some traffic outside my office window. So, when you bring yourself into tapping into your five senses, you automatically do two things. One, you bring yourself back into your awareness of your body. And two, you bring yourself back into the present moment. So those are good for that, to do that. And then always know some guided meditations will remind you of this. I usually don't. Maybe I should. But that you are in control. And, there's an idea that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, mm-hmm. right? When you go to meditate, you're always in control. You can always decide you're finished at any moment. You're the one that's in power here. So reminding yourself, I'm in control. I'm never going to be out of control mm-hmm. in a meditation.
Okay.
And I can open my eyes at any time. If I feel uncomfortable, I can stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then, recognizing the power to bring yourself back into your body, which is where you should be. That's actually the place of power, right? Because you're there and you're in control.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you also described trying to feel what's going on there. In other words, what do you hear, what do you see, what do you smell, what do you taste, rather mm-hmm. than what am I deciding I'm tasting? What am I deciding that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm deciding that I'm hearing? You're actually just saying, see what comes to you rather than try to mentally construct it.
Well, I think we construct a small vignette that we can do creatively, but other things may come to us. And as far as tapping into what am I hearing, what am I, seeing and tasting, those things, you can do that at any time. It's a wonderful way if you're worried about something, if you're fearful, if you're worried, if you're guilty, if you're feeling emotions that you don't like that are generally always attached to the past or the future.
Mm-hmm.
Worried about something not going well or upset about something, the way something did go.
Right.
When we bring ourselves back into the present moment, we're back in the present. And that's the easiest way I've ever found to bring myself back into the present moment, is to tap into my five senses.
Okay.
So Neville's going to give us an example
All right.
of a vignette, I guess. So
okay.
He says, for example, suppose you desired promotion in office. Being congratulated would be an event you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. Having selected this action as the one you will experience in imagination, immobilize the physical body and induce a state akin to sleep, a drowsy state, but one in which you're still able to control the direction of your thoughts. A state in which you are attentive without effort. Now, imagine that a friend is standing before you. Put your imaginary hand into his. First, feel it to be solid and real, and then carry on an imaginary conversation with him in harmony with the action. Do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of space and at a distance in point of time being congratulated on your good fortune. Instead, make elsewhere here and the future now. The future event is a reality now in a dimensionally larger world. And oddly enough, now in a dimensionally larger world is equivalent to here in the ordinary three-dimensional space of everyday life. The difference between feeling yourself in action here and now and visualizing yourself in action as though you were on a motion picture screen is the difference between success and failure.
That's pretty straightforward right there. That mm-hmm. basically says it. You've got to be in it if you want to succeed. If you're not in it, you're not going to succeed. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, and something that just hit me reading this is where he says, do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of space. Okay.
Right.
I don't do that, right? But he also says, do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of time.
Yeah, and that's the harder one to stay away from, because that's what we tend to do, isn't it?
And I have an idea. When I read that, I thought, am I doing that? Like, I use this method. So when I use this method, even though I am here and now and I am imagining this happening in my body, am I still in my head, like, sort of
projecting it,
thinking that it's off in the future, right?
Yeah. I do that. I know I do it. And as you were saying that, I'm realizing, boy, I have got some work to do here to get my method cleaned up a little bit.
So I love it. He says the difference will be appreciated if you'll now visualize yourself climbing a ladder. And then with eyelids closed, imagine that a ladder is right in front of you and feel you're actually climbing it. Desire.
That's true. There isn't much about climbing a ladder in a future, is there? We just don't even think about it that way. It's like, I'm going to climb the ladder tomorrow. No.
That's really, really true. I love that he brings it down into something that's really practical and really solid. Like, if you're climbing a ladder, you definitely you're holding on, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can feel the rungs under your feet. You can feel the sides of the ladder in your hands.
If you have a height issue, you're hanging out for dear life. I mean, it's like your instant thing right now.
I'm going to just climb a step stool.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's actually something Louise would have to do, because, she has a hard time with heights. So we'd have to make it a very short ladder for her.
I always I feel like if it's me climbing, I'm fine with it. But my problem is when I'm watching someone else, like looking out the window and someone's climbing up.
Especially if the ladder's bowed. You know how a long ladder can get that bowed look to it? It almost looks like it's going to fall apart at any second, right?
Oh, that's really scary. Okay, so he says desire fit. So we talked about, that's step one.
Yep.
Desire, physical immobility bordering on sleep.
Mm-hmm. Meditation.
And I want to say, I have spoken to people before that say every time they try to meditate, they go to sleep. And so there's a reason why they have special, like, meditation cushions, or why people will sit on the floor to meditate. You're less likely to go to sleep, obviously, if you're, sitting cross-legged with your back straight on the floor, or maybe up against a wall, or in a straight back chair. Then if you're, then Neville's saying, okay, go lie down on the couch, right?
Right.
And that may be hard for some people that are sleep deprived. Many people are. People that don't rest enough. It's like you finally give yourself, 15 minutes to do this exercise, and then you just totally crash out and go to sleep. So, put yourself in a comfortable position, but I would say he keeps saying to lie down. I think it's fine to sit in a chair, especially if you have a tendency to like doze off if you're.
I like that. That's a good suggestion, because, I've experienced both. And talk about guided meditations. The best guided meditation I ever had was in somebody's living room, and there were a whole bunch of us all kind of spread out around the room. And most people were sitting up. I decided to lie down with a couch cushion under my head and just lie there in that position, kind of on my side. And loved it. Because I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the person who was doing leading the guided meditation. I just liked her voice, or I liked where she was going with the story, or whatever it was. But it was a wonderful experience. And yet, I've also had those situations where you lie down and, like they were saying there, you want to fall asleep. It's just, you can just feel yourself going there. And you're right, that's the best time to sit up. That's the best time to pick like a hard surface or something to help keep awake and, not fall completely out of consciousness and stay in the meditative state.
Yeah, and the other thing that Neville's going to talk about that we've talked about before is actually doing this meditation before you go to sleep at night. So you are lying down like as you're going to sleep. So the kind of two different times that you may choose to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I know that when I do this as I'm going to sleep, sometimes if I'm really tired, the second I start doing the process, I'm out.
Well, exactly. That's what I did last night. Last night I was trying to literally focus on this kind of an imagination. And I said, okay, I'm going to visualize this for about 5 or 10 minutes before I fall asleep. I got about 30 seconds into it and I was asleep.
Then you wake up at some point, or in the morning, it's like, I don't think I did the...
No, I didn't.
I did that too, so that's kind of funny. Okay, so let's see where we are. If when the physical body is immobilized, we become possessed of the idea to do something and imagine that we are doing it here and now and keep the imaginary action feelingly going right up until sleep ensues, we are likely to awaken out of the physical body to find ourselves in a dimensionally larger world with a dimensionally larger focus and actually doing what we desired and imagined we were doing in the flesh. But whether we awaken there or not, we are actually performing the action in the fourth dimensional world, and we will reenact it in the future here in the third dimensional world.
Let's stop right there because he's mentioned the fourth dimensional world before. He didn't really define what that is. What do you think the fourth dimension is from his perspective? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, I think he's going to get into it a little more.
Oh, okay.
And I think that, like he says, he's talking about, well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but an imaginal world or a fourth dimensional space. But he does get into what the fourth dimension is.
All right.
So,
well, let's wait to hear what he says then.
Experience has taught me to restrict the imaginary action, to condense the idea, which is to be the object of our meditation, into a single act, and to reenact it over and over until it has the feeling of reality.
So the vignette we talked about is a single act.
Yep. Like, the thing that he mentioned, the idea he mentioned was if you wanted to get a promotion at work, that you would, the thing that would follow that would be people would be congratulating you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you're experiencing in your mind, you're imagining just being congratulated. I'm being congratulated now for my promotion. I'm being congratulated. I'm being congratulated.
And remember, he had a friend standing in front of you, and you're shaking the person's hand. The person's shaking your hand saying congratulations. And so he kind of boiled it down to that little space.
Right.
So he says, otherwise the attention will wander off along an associational track, and a host of associated images will be presented to our attention.
Yeah,
and in
true.
a few seconds, they'll lead us hundreds of miles away from our objective in point of space and years away in point of time. So that's what we don't want to do. We don't want to get so carried away that now the one little thing that we tried to devise, we're off in our imagination way somewhere else. He says, if we decide to climb a particular flight of stairs, because that is the likely event to follow the realization of our desire, then we must restrict the action to climbing that particular flight of stairs. Should our attention wander off, we must bring it back to its task of climbing that flight of stairs and keep on doing so until the imaginary action has all the solidity and distinctness of reality. The idea must be maintained in the field of presentation without any sensible effort on our part. We must, with minimum of effort, permeate the mind with the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
And here's a test. Here's a test to know whether or not you're doing it well. If you are visualizing climbing a flight of stairs and you're doing it over and over again, and you even do it before you go to sleep, and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning with your feet tired, you know you did it well.
All night long I climbed those stairs. Well, I think the interesting thing here is that when we bring ourselves back, to over and over doing this same small action that we have decided upon, we can then really start to feel it in the body.
Exactly.
Because we're doing it over and over. So can we hear our feet going up the stairs, the sound of it? Can we feel the stairs underneath our feet? We can really get into it.
And I think it's important to note that for people like me who do have trouble with this kind of imagining, if I can imagine that I'm actually in it for like a second or two, that's a victory compared to where I normally am. That's actually good. It doesn't mean that I want to always limit it to 1 second or 2 seconds, but that's 1 or 2 seconds more than I was doing before. So I don't want to beat myself up over the fact that I wasn't able to stay in that space for half an hour. I want to congratulate myself and celebrate the fact I did it for a second or two. I actually felt it. I was actually there.
Well, I think what's even greater about it of this method for someone who has trouble with, visualizing or imagining is that it's a small vignette.
Yeah, makes it easier.
It's just his ideas are really small. Shaking someone's hand, hearing them congratulate you, walking up a flight of stairs. Those are both really, succinct. So now he says drowsiness facilitates change because it favors attention without effort, but it must not be pushed to the stage of sleep in which we no longer be able to control the movements of our attention, but rather a moderate degree of drowsiness in which we're still able to direct our thoughts. A most effective way to embody a desire is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then, in a relaxed and sleepy state, repeat over and over again, like a lullaby, any short phrase which implies fulfillment of our desire, such as thank you, as though we addressed a higher power for having done it for us. If, however, we seek a conscious projection into a dimensionally larger world, then we must keep the action going right up until sleep ensues.
So what's he saying with this last sentence? If we seek a conscious projection into a dimensionally larger world, I'm not sure exactly what that means, then we must keep the action going until we go to sleep.
I'm not sure. It sounds like he's talking about astral projection.
It kind of does, yeah.
And I don't know if he is. I'm thinking he's going to start talking about the dimensions.
Okay.
In this first chapter, actually. So
I'll just be patient again.
Experience in imagination with all the distinctness of reality what would be experienced in the flesh were you to achieve your goal, and you shall in time meet it in the flesh as you met it in your imagination. Feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions presumed to be true, because assumptions, though unreal to the senses, if persisted in, until they have the feeling of reality, will harden into facts. To an assumption, all means which promote its realization are good. It influences the behavior of all by inspiring in all the movements, the actions, and the words which tend towards its fulfillment. To understand how man molds his future in harmony with his assumption, we must know what we mean by a dimensionally larger world.
Here we go.
For it is to a dimensionally larger world that we go to alter our future. The observation of an event before it occurs implies that the event is predetermined from the point of view of man in the three-dimensional world. Therefore, to change the conditions here in the 3 dimensions of space, we must first change them in the 4 dimensions of space. Interesting
use of the word predetermined there. Normally, I think of the word predetermined as fate, as this has been set for all time. I think what he means is predetermined means determined first.
Right, and he says that it's from our point of view here in the 3-dimensional world we live in that it seems that the event is predetermined.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it gets changed first in this 4th dimension. I know this is really out there because Neville can really go, he can get out there, right?
No kidding.
Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world and would no doubt deny the existence of a dimensionally larger self. He's quite familiar with the 3 dimensions of length, width, and height, and he feels that if there were a 4th dimension, it should be just as obvious to him as the dimensions of length, width, and height. A dimension is not a line. It is any way in which a thing can be measured that is entirely different from all other ways. That is, to measure a solid 4th dimensionally, we simply measure it in any direction except that of its length, width, and height. Is there another way of measuring an object other than those of its length, width, and height? Time measures my life without employing the 3 dimensions of length, width, and height. There's no such thing as an instantaneous object. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It endures for a definite length of time. We can measure its lifespan without using the dimensions of length, width, and height. time is definitely a fourth way of measuring an object.
So here's an interesting thing. He's made it pretty clear toward the end here that time is the fourth dimension. And yet, a few paragraphs back, he also makes the point, let's see if I can find it. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world and would no doubt deny the existence of a dimensionally larger self. And when he said dimensionally larger self, what I thought of was inner being. Inner being being where we have the non-physical side of us and the physical side of us.
I had the same thought.
So
and that when we're in this space of meditating, that we're actually going into that dimension to alter the future that we perceive to be predetermined when we're back here in our physical body.
It almost sounds like he is associating this dimensionally larger self, or the non-physical side of ourselves, or the inner being, or whatever you want to call it. He is associating that with a fourth dimension of time. It sounds like there's a connection there. He's not saying that one is the other, but that they're connected, it sounds like.
So let's see. I actually think we can get through it today, which is what I was hoping. Because then we could move on to the second chapter this afternoon.
We do tend to make mincemeat of this stuff, don't we?
I'm excited about it, yeah. So he says time is definitely a fourth way of measuring an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line, which lies entirely in one dimension, acquires shape, mass, and substance by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give, which would make it just as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces, and surfaces are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. The new quality is changeability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we obtain a line. By bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is but a cross-section of a line, which in turn is a cross-section of a surface, which in turn but a cross-section of a solid, which is in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, but a cross-section of a four-dimensional object.
So I can hear the minds of all the people who had trouble with geometry saying, oh God, do I have to really handle this?
We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are but cross-sections of four-dimensional bodies, which means when I meet you, I see a cross-section of the four-dimensional you, the fourth dimension self that is not seen. To see the four-dimensional self, I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them as all coexisting. My focus should take in the entire array of sensory impressions which you have experienced on earth, plus those that you might encounter. I should see them not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as a present whole. Because change is the characteristic of the fourth dimension, I should see them in a state of flux, as a living, animated whole. If we have all this clearly fixed in our minds, what does it mean to us in this three-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along time's length, we can see the future and alter it as we so desire. The world which we think so solidly real is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. It's an abstraction from a more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, a more fundamental world abstracted from a still more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, and so on to infinity. The absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Man can prove the existence of a dimensionally larger world simply by focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and feels it. If he remains concentrated in this state, his present environment will pass away and he will awaken in a dimensionally larger world where the object of his contemplation will be seen as a concrete, objective reality. Intuitively, I feel that were he to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally larger world and retreat still farther within his mind, he would again bring about an externalization of time. He would discover that every time he retreats into his inner mind and brings about an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally larger, and he would therefore conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the climbing of a multitudinous dimensional time block. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe. But in practice, how we use this serial universe to change the future is more important. To change the future, we only need concern ourselves with two worlds in the infinite series: the world we know by reason of our bodily organs, and the world we perceive independently of our bodily organs.
So he does seem to have tied those two concepts together.
Yep.
Because ultimately, if I look at it from the perspective of the non-physical us, the non-physical us, as he's describing it, can be understood as, well, before I even do that, let's talk about his description of time. Time is like a three-dimensional being, or some kind of active dynamic process or whatever, playing out like a play over time. And as it plays out, each little motion in the scene gets attached to the next motion, to the next one, creating like this long worm that's all visible at one particular time. That seems to be what he's describing. And if you look at it that way, then the non-physical us is the worm of us going back to distant past and all the stuff we've done throughout our lives. That's the worm.
Yep, exactly. Because we know that time actually is not linear. We know that everything is happening at the same time. But in our experience, in our three-dimensional experience, if I want to go from point A to point B, I have to move my physical body from point A to point B, and that takes what I perceive to be time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it is the other dimension.
Time is the other dimension.
And I don't think that you have to have a grasp on this fourth dimension to really use this method.
Yeah, you don't have to understand geometry. That's true.
Or the time-space continuum.
Or the time-space continuum. Absolutely.
All you have to recognize is that there's a method to this madness, and if we use it and we're persistent with it, we will change our experience.
Thank goodness that the process is so much simpler than the science behind it. Otherwise, we'd be going nuts trying to figure this stuff out.
But it's very, very simple. It just takes practice. And I think that as complicated as Neville can seem to the reader that's just starting reading Neville, his methods are actually very simple. And so we're going to talk about that more in our next podcast, but about, the assumptions becoming facts. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, well, we'll pick that up this afternoon because this is our day where we get to do two podcasts in one day together, which is really fun. Yay. I like that.
I will be back this afternoon. I like it too.
It's a lot of fun. Before we leave too, I want to remind people that Cindie is a professional life coach, and you can tell she's really, really good at it. Some of you might be interested in reaching out to her, maybe talking about some stuff that's on your mind that you don't necessarily want to talk about in public, because some stuff we don't want to talk about in public.
Right.
So for that, if that's the case, Cindie, how does somebody reach out to you?
They can reach out to me online. My website is cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez.com, and there's a contact form there, or you can send me an email. Find me on social media, Cindie Chavez. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and Facebook somewhat, mostly Twitter. But yeah, just reach out any way you can. Give me a wave if you would like some coaching. I'm happy to do that as well.
All right. Very good. Well, I'm looking forward to carrying on the conversation this afternoon.
So am I.
All right. We hope that you'll join us as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.